Radiation continues to work up into 2 months after treatment, so the results wouldn't be known until the end of that period. We returned home December 5th, and an MRI later showed the tumor was gone. During the next few months, Brice's system continued to recover from the effects of the radiation. But this was a slow process. On March 7, 1994, Brice had an MRI and they found another tumor on his spine, T10. Brice was reproducing cancer cells in the spinal fluid that travels through the brain and down the spine to eventually attach and grow into a tumor. With the third tumor occurring, Dr. Ayer and the oncology department at MD Anderson gave Brice a rate of survival of only 20% and would not recommend any further treatment. We notified Dr. Epstein, pediatric neurosurgeon at New York University Hospital in New York City, to see if he would recommend any treatment for Brice. He wanted to try, and he said that he would do surgery on Brice as soon as Brice's blood count and platelets were stable and he could travel. We scheduled to leave on May 9, 1994, with surgery the next day. The weekend before we were to leave on Monday, Brice had a major seizure. He was home in Parrington when the seizure occurred, and the ambulance took him to the hospital. He was in critical condition. He was taken to ICU. They did a brain scan, which revealed that his brain was just a mass, and the doctors pronounced him brain dead. They had him on life support and recommended that it be removed. The family agreed with their recommendation, but requested that his mother could hold him and rock him until he passed away. The doctors agreed, and Misty held him and rocked him for a short time. Brice took a deep breath and went into a natural sleep. Brice continued to improve, so they moved him into his own room. The hospital buzzed about this miracle. Everyone knew there had to be a miraculous intervention. Because Brice continued to improve, Dr. Alcala, Brice's oncologist, recommended we go on to New York and let Dr. Epstein treat Brice. We flew to New York City, where Brice was entered into ICU until the surgery. They performed surgery and removed most of the tumor from the spine T10 and also replaced Brice's shunt. After 3 weeks in New York, we flew back to Amarillo. Brice had been home a few days when he had another brain bleed. Brain bleeds can affect every part of the system. They gave him medicine and used a feeding tube as Brice recovered. Brice stayed in the hospital a few days and continued his treatment through the middle of June. Brice began to improve enough that he was able to get up and play with Ashley again. As Brice went through these different medical situations, Ashley would watch videos, read books, and do puzzles with him. She became a little mother toward him. On June 19, 1994, we went into the hospital for a spinal tap, and the result came back with no evidence of cancer cells. The Make-A-Wish Foundation had scheduled a trip for Brice and his family to Disney World in Orlando, Florida. On July 1st, we flew to Orlando to the Make-A-Wish Village, Disney World, and other attractions. On July 5th, we were at Orlando's Universal Studio when Brice had a major seizure. The ambulance took him to Arnold Palmer Children's Hospital. He was there for 2 nights and 1 day before we were able to fly back to Amarillo. By July 9th, Brice began to have a few light seizures, and his head started to tilt to the right. We went to Dr. Alcala, where he entered Brice into the hospital for a nuclear scan of the brain. The next morning, Dr. Alcala told us that Brice had a reoccurrence of melablastoma tumors appearing in the center of the brain, the cortical and right frontal parietal region of the spine level of C7. We left the hospital that afternoon, and the next day the family met with Dr. Alcala and hospice to discuss Brice's condition. Misty and Jay made the decision for Brice not to have to go back to the hospital and asked hospice to take his case. Over the next 8 days, Brice's days were spent with his twin sister, mother, father, family members, and friends that wanted to come be with him. Brice went to be with Jesus on July 21, 1994, at the age of 4 years and 8 months.